guys, my name is Jenna. If you guys are new here, welcome back to my channel and welcome to our wedding planning series. Video number 1. You guys, I have tried filming this video like maybe 10 times at this point, but I just can't get it right because I'm not used to videos like this. Like I've never made a wedding planning series, obviously. What I am used to filming is lifestyle vlogs. So make sure you're subscribed if you want to check out taking you guys along my life outside of my 9-to-5 full-time job, trying to incorporate work-life balance. But I told myself and I told you guys, if you're returning subscribers, that I would make a wedding planning series just because I feel like it's valuable all around for me to document what I'm liking, what I'm deciding this year in 2025 for a 2026 wedding. I'm over a year out. I want to talk about like my overall style and just have you guys kind of get to know me more as a bride and just kind of my overall preferences, how I came to certain conclusions. I will say, I'm going to disclaim that I won't be talking about the very specifics of my wedding budget just because my parents will be paying a good portion of the wedding. So I just want to be respectful to their privacy on that front. But I will talk about like overall decisions and I'll talk about aspects of the budget. In this sit down series, which I'll post every couple months, I will talk about big things for the wedding that I've decided on and go through the process of how I came to a certain conclusion. And so today we're talking all things wedding venue. And throughout my entire wedding planning journey over the next year or year and a half, I am going to give you guys resources. I just want to actually make them myself before I release them to you guys. So I will be working on that as I'm planning my wedding. But today we'll be talking all things wedding venues. I think that's everything. If you guys like what you hear, let's go ahead and get started. Also, like I said, this is like my 11th time trying to film this video, but I got a haircut yesterday and I wasn't vlogging. So I was like, this is a good incentive for me to film. First, I want to give you guys just an overall introduction about who I am, what type of wedding that I want, how I even came to the conclusion of having a wedding at all, because I know that everyone does something a little bit different these days. And then I'll get into the wedding venue tours and I'll even tell you guys which wedding venue I did choose. So here's a little introduction about me as a bride. I was never the person to ever have a Pinterest board about like my dream wedding, my dream ring even, like really anything in regards to like getting married at all. I think that's because my fiance is my high school sweetheart. We just started dating so young that I kind of think I never wanted to even talk about, dream about, envision or visualize or plan out my wedding because I wanted to be so cautious that if we were to get married, it wouldn't just be out of default and it wouldn't be this like naive dream. So I actually really made it a point to kind of never really very seriously address the topic of marriage until we started living together 9 years into our relationship. So granted, I know 9 years is a long time, but we started dating when we were 16 and 17. So I just was never really the person to ever have like a Pinterest board. And so once I did get engaged, I was like, how am I supposed to plan this wedding? I have no idea what I want. And especially with social media, you just see the most like grandeur, luscious, expensive, luxurious weddings. I just like couldn't envision it for myself because it was so kind of out of reach when I would see it on social media. And I do think that I'm one of the earlier people in like my overall life to get married in terms of like my friends. I do have an older sister that got married in 2018 and I did actually plan a good chunk of her wedding when I was 21 years old, but that was like forever ago now. So I was like, okay, I think I know what to do, but I have no idea what I really want or like how to make decisions and how do I even know I want a wedding at all? Because there's also the idea of a destination wedding or an elopement. So I did think about those 3 things with a traditional wedding. And ultimately I was really close to doing a destination wedding, you guys, but I just decided that I think I would have regretted it because if I were to have a destination wedding, it would just automatically be a lot less guests, which when me and Thomas, my fiance, when we sat down and made just like our overall tentative first people we thought of guest list, we had a lot of people. So that's why I think that the very, very, very first thing that you want to do if you want to get started on wedding planning is just make an overall guest list because your guest list will define everything else. And I feel like it will help guide you if you're someone like me who you don't have a hard time making decisions, but sometimes it just feels like there's too many options. Having a good guest list gives you an idea of the size. And so ultimately that's how we decided to just do a traditional wedding at a venue. And we actually decided on a Washington, D.C. hotel. So now a little bit more about the overall venues. So I do live in Arlington, Virginia, right outside of DC. I've never actually lived in the city itself. I've just lived like a couple metro stops away ever since I graduated college in 2019. My older sister got married at a vineyard. Thomas's older sister got married at a barn. I just kind of thought I wanted to do something different just for the sake of like giving our families different experiences too and giving myself a different experience. And so for that reason, I was like, maybe I'll do it in DC. But even then I was like, how am I supposed to know where I even want to get married? Here's what I did. I went on Google Maps and I looked up different wedding venues, all just in my overall general location of where I was. So I looked a lot in Northern Virginia and I looked a lot in Washington, DC. And then I just made a master list of every single venue that was in the location that I wanted. And then that's kind of how I started. I would say I emailed around 20 wedding venues, with the venues being all different styles. There were a lot of like manors and like houses in Leesburg, Virginia, and kind of like the more rustic vibe, but like the luxurious rustic vibe. I looked at different wineries in Northern Virginia and then a bunch of different venues in Washington, DC, with some of them being hotels, galleries, galleries I looked at, also wineries both in DC and Northern Virginia, and even restaurants too that were really big that I knew of, like probably could have been a wedding venue. Those were all the different types of venues that I reached out to. And I made a whole spreadsheet of all the different emails, whether or not I reached out to them, so that I could start getting some quotes. Because the quotes are also going to be a huge defining factor. You have your guest list, and then you have like your overall like quote of how much it's going to cost to even rent the space and how much it's going to cost to have your guests eat dinner and have an open bar, things like that. I knew I wanted an open bar no matter what. I was like, I have no idea where I'm going to get married, but all I know is that I want it to be open bar for my guests. So that was something that was really important to me. And I ended up ultimately, out of all the different venues that I just talked about, it was honestly really nice getting a whole map and list of everything, just because I felt like those were all the options that I was working with. And it helped knowing I didn't want to drive farther than like an hour for my wedding. And I did have family coming from Virginia, from DC, and from Maryland as well. And some from even like overseas. Because of all of those reasons, I ended up going with a DC hotel. Here's why. I want to have just like that DC feel. Being somebody that never actually lived in Washington, DC, I just want to get a sense of what it would feel like to like live a luxurious DC life for even one night. Another huge reason, honestly more important than the first reason, is that the DC hotels, or just hotels in general, compared to all the different types of wedding venues there are, the hotels are usually pretty all-inclusive. All-inclusive meaning your chairs, tables, linens, napkins, food and beverage, alcohol, dance floor even, cake even, is already included with your wedding venue cost. That was just something that I knew right off the bat that I wanted. I wanted to like reduce the number of extraneous vendors, and we'll see way down the line, you know, once the wedding is over, we'll have a whole reflection on whether or not I thought all of this was the right decision. But ultimately I did go DC hotels just because I liked that all-inclusive aspect of planning the wedding. I didn't have to think about finding a good caterer and then testing all of it, and same with the cake, and same with chairs and stuff. Which types of chairs do I want and where do I want to get them from? There's already so many different rentals that I'll have to do with vendors, some of them being photo booth. I looked at different photographers, overall decor, like drapery and stuff, that I was like, if I can just get the basics from the venue, then that's perfect. And that's ultimately why I went with a DC hotel. The third big reason that I went with a DC hotel, or just hotels in general, are that me, my groom, and then our families, and then a wedding party, if we were to have one, we're not gonna have one. I'm not gonna have bridesmaids, and Thomas is not gonna have groomsmen, but if we were, our families are enough that we wanted to be able to stay within the venue on the day that we do get married. I don't want to have to like drive somewhere else on the day that I'm getting ready. And I wanted guests to all be in the same place, and they don't have to stay in our exact hotel, but there's so many hotels nearby that it just kind of made the most sense logistics wise in terms of getting married at a hotel, just because there are so many rooms available. And since it is in the city, they will have to transport themselves just one way, you know, to the actual hotel, and then they can kind of stay put for the rest of the night, sleep at the hotel, or drive back home at the very end of the night. So I really liked that aspect of DC hotels too. So I think those were the three main reasons why I chose an overall hotel, but then a DC hotel, just to get that like DC vibe. And all I knew was that I wanted someone to come to my wedding and feel like they were in Washington, DC, whether it was because of the location, how the vibe was inside, anything. I just wanted it to feel like Washington, DC. So yeah, that was a huge aspect of my actual tours that I went on. Okay, I think that's everything in terms of like who I am as a bride, how I got to the decision of doing a DC hotel, and now let's get to the venue tours. Okay, wedding venue tours. Like I said, you guys, I reached out to probably 20 different venues, and that was inclusive of all different types of venues. Of the 20, I ended up touring 5, just because I also did not want to be the person that was touring like every single possible venue, because for me, I feel like I'm a more simple person. I was like, all of them kind of feel the same at some point. It's just either a ballroom or an open space, and I was like, at some point I just have to like choose which one I like the most. And so I did my best to research as best as possible the pictures for all the different venues online when they gave me like their packages, and I would reach out for pricing. I looked at all of the venues that were within my overall budget, and then from there I chose 5 that I wanted to tour. I think 5 is a perfect number personally, but if you're planning your wedding, definitely just do what feels best for you. I think my sister said she toured like over 10 or 15. I decided to go with 5 because I knew that there was really only like 3 I was really considering, and so I wanted to do a little bit more than what I was considering to make sure that I was making a good decision. I'll leave the tour right here because I only got vertical clips. I'm really sorry. It was just really hard, honestly, to remember to take both types of clips, and I did actually post all of my wedding venue tours on Instagram. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, then you already know all of these places, but this is for specifically YouTube, and I want to be able to go into more depth for each of the different tours and just talk about like, again, my own personal preferences, and then end with which one I chose. The last thing I want to note is that I'm having my wedding in 2026 around like the springtime, so the weather will be really nice. So ideally I was like, I want an outdoor ceremony. Sorry, the sun is kind of going in and out if you can see a change in lighting, but that is how I found my very first wedding venue tour that I booked. The St. Regis Hotel in Washington, D.C. It is so, so beautiful. I was so encapsulated by the outdoor ceremony photos. And then I saw what the ballroom looked like in photos and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to tour this place. It was actually the very first place that I felt like I could have my wedding in Washington, D.C. because I kind of felt like I wanted it to be in D.C., but I wasn't really sure like what type of venue in D.C. I wanted, if I wanted like a gallery or something more rustic like in Georgetown or something more classy. But once I saw the St. Regis, I was like, I need to tour this place. Overall, when you walk into the lobby, it is just this beautiful, grand lobby. There's like a lot of gold on the ceilings. And the person that gave us the tour gave us a lot of history about the building itself too. The lobby is just really beautiful. They also have like an afternoon tea service that they do publicly. So I went on this wedding venue tour over the weekend and there were like people doing their little high teas in the afternoon in the lobby. And there's these like huge red curtains. It just feels very like Renaissance, old-timey luxe. The lobby is really beautiful. And that's exactly where our guests would enter. They would enter in the lobby and then, or would they? I don't know if they would enter in the lobby or not, but they would see the lobby at some point. The lobby was really pretty. And then we saw multiple different spaces that would all be included if I were to have my wedding there. One of them was kind of like an open bar area where there was like a bar and then there was like an empty corner where most people did their photo booths. It was nice also for her to lay out like what people usually do with the space, just because when you do see it, it's like completely bare most of the time. I got lucky for the St. Regis tour because they were having a 100-person event that night. So the actual ballroom itself was actually already set up with like different tables and there was like a live band and stuff and uplighting. I didn't love the red uplighting, but it gave me a good idea of like what the space would look like for a 100-person event. So that was really nice. And then attached to the grand ballroom, there's all these windows and doors, and that takes you to the outdoor ceremony space. There was a lot of snow when we toured it, but man, the outdoor ceremony space was just so beautiful. There's giant magnolia trees that I was like, oh my gosh, that is just so stunning. The ballroom itself had these like beautiful curtains and arches that were so tall. The ceiling was like wooden and gold at the top. It was so pretty. So once I left the St. Regis, I was like, okay, this is like a really, really nice place. That is venue number one. I'm gonna talk about pros and cons later on after I go through all the tours. Next, we went to the Hotel Washington. This used to be called the W Hotel, but now it's called Hotel Washington. I think there's like different ownership now. This was the second tour that I booked and I was so excited to see this because I've actually been to the rooftop before for dinner and the rooftop is just so nice. It's directly next to the White House. You can see the monument from the rooftop. It is just like a really vibey place. Honestly, you just feel like you're in DC when you're on the roof. And similarly to the St. Regis, when you enter the lobby, it is just this like giant room with like extremely tall ceilings. There's like a black and white checkered floor in the lobby. It just feels like you're in a whole different world. So that was one thing I was like, okay, lobby, check again. I know for a fact that guests would enter through the lobby if we were to do the Hotel Washington, which was really important to me just because I wanted to get like a whole experience for my guests right away. So they would enter in the lobby and then take the elevators or the stairs up to the rooftop because the ceremony space is connected to the rooftop. It's kind of like their ballroom space where if your wedding is small enough, you can actually have your reception there. But for the size that Thomas and I are thinking, that rooftop ballroom would be the ceremony space. This ceremony space was definitely like not what I first envisioned when I thought of my overall ceremony because I really wanted something outdoors. But the good thing was that there were giant windows in the ceremony space. So I felt like it was still drenched with natural light and made me think I wouldn't have to worry about the weather. So that was really good. It was just definitely an overall very like blank space. So I really had to think in my head creatively, like, could I brighten this space up? Could I envision myself here? Like, what would the chairs look like? What would the aisle look like? All of those things. So that was the ceremony space. And then right directly out of the ceremony space, you just go down a hallway and then you go to the overall rooftop space where you would actually have your cocktail hour. This cocktail hour space was really cool. I liked that it was on the rooftop, and specifically where the rooftop is, you can see the monument from like the main window. And then there's like an arch in the rooftop bar that's actually inspired by the DC Metro. It looks like very similar to a lot of the DC Metro locations. I really liked that aspect too. I was like, okay, this feels like very DC. And I liked that cocktail hour was on a rooftop because it would be the springtime. So that's cocktail hour. And then we went all the way to the basement to see the grand ballroom where the main reception would be. This ballroom was so freaking big and it was like totally empty, which was such a contrast compared to the St. Regis because the St. Regis was like already totally done for an event, whereas the Hotel Washington was just totally blank with like random chairs, random tables, things like that. So yeah, there was that, but then the ceiling lights are really cool. In the grand ballroom, it was again inspired by the overall, I think, like DC map. So there's like all these LED lights at the top and you can change the color of them. And overall it was just a really good, like, you're kind of typical ballroom with like little aspects here and there that was very DC. So that was the Hotel Washington. Next, we have the Fairmont Hotel in Georgetown. This was such a beautiful place. I think that when I posted all of my tours on Instagram, most people actually liked the Fairmont the most, and I totally understand why. It was such a beautiful place, and I actually toured it on a really pretty day too. The lighting was really good. I really liked the hotel lobby. It was very different from the St. Regis and Hotel Washington, where it was like a big, tall lobby. This was like a more slanted lobby, but it kind of felt like the lobby itself was like a greenhouse. There was just so much light and windows everywhere that it was very well lit. I loved that aspect. And then part of the lobby is actually where you would have your cocktail hour, in addition to this open area in the middle outside, where your cocktail hour would be half outside too. So I liked that because I was like, okay, that's good. There's like an aspect that is outside, and other than that, we'll have really good lighting. I loved the area that was like blocked off for your cocktail hour inside. They have these like giant trees and pedestals that would block it off to make it feel very private. And then you would go through a hallway, which was very beautiful. I definitely was like, as I was going through the hallway, I was like, okay, I could see photos here. That's really nice. So like portraits and stuff. And then we got to the colonnade room, which was the room that you would have both your ceremony and your reception. And during the cocktail hour, they would do like a flip. So they would get rid of a screen that was holding all of your separate chairs and tables and stuff. Basically, like your ceremony would be in half of the space. There would be you, your fiance, and then a screen for like all of your other reception stuff. And then during the cocktail hour, they would take down the screen and flip the whole space to be your reception area. So yeah, that was really interesting. That was the first time that I like encountered a venue like that. Also, this had a dance floor that was kind of like a stage in the very middle of the place too, with like a grand chandelier in the middle. It was a very unique space. It was overall very light and airy. There was like trees already inside. It was such a beautiful venue overall. So yeah, that was the Fairmont. Fourth, we have the Mayflower. This is actually where one of my best friends actually got married. I didn't go to that wedding because we weren't really close back then, but I was really excited to tour the Mayflower because I knew that she got married there and I knew that she loved it. I would say of all the venues, this was the one that felt the most like really the most luxurious DC in my opinion. From the moment you enter the lobby, you see like this famous hallway of mirrors that it's like mirrors and doors that go into different ballrooms within the hallway. And it is just, I can't even tell you guys. I'm not explaining it well to do it justice. Here's just a photo for you guys to see. It is so pretty. Like, I was like, wow. Again, I was like, I could see all of my photos being here too. So the Mayflower was really nice also because you didn't have to go up or down different flights of stairs, different floors to go to different areas of your wedding. It would just be like in one hallway bouncing back and forth between a different ceremony room, a cocktail hour room, and then the grand ballroom for your overall reception. And this grand ballroom was also very unique. All of them were really unique, honestly. But this grand ballroom was really cool because I remember distinctly that during this tour, the woman said that the Mayflower has the most amount of real gold aside from the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., which I think was so cool. So I really liked that. And the grand ballroom is just like very different. There's 2 levels actually. So it kind of looks like a theater almost, where there's different columns and a whole different floor for you to see down in the middle. It's just so pretty. I loved it. And then the ceremony and cocktail hour room, I feel like I didn't talk about it that much. It's really just because the grand ballroom I think is like the star of the show, but the ceremony and the cocktail hour rooms were very like similar, I would say. They were all like in theme, I guess, with the grand ballroom. They were just a little bit different, so I didn't really have honestly too much to say other than the tour video. Lastly was the Kimpton Monaco Hotel. This venue I think was the most unique in my opinion of all the ones that I went on, and the lobby is so different. It's actually like all green. It kind of felt like I was in like the Emerald City and Wizard of Oz and stuff, and it was really cool. The decor was really, really nice. It was very historic, and it was very much a venue that like speaks for itself type of venue, which is something that I wanted. The Kimpton Monaco is similar to the Fairmont, where your ceremony and your reception would be in the same place. They would just do a flip during cocktail hour. The only thing to note was that the hallway was pretty long between the cocktail hour room and the ceremony / reception room, but I didn't really think that was a big deal. She said that the worker there said that you could put different like easels of pictures and stuff along the hallway to make it fun for your guests. Yeah, plus the cocktail hour, it really doesn't matter that much. It's really just like a simple like 1 hour for your guests to start eating and drinking, and then it's time for the bride and groom to really just like reconvene and get ready for the reception. So I didn't really mind that much about the cocktail hour room, and it was overall still really beautiful. I think the cocktail hour room used to be like the treasury room or something like that for the US. So again, overall just a lot of history, and the grand ballroom itself was so cool. That was similar to the Fairmont, where there was an area in the middle with like a big dome where that's where your ceremony would be, and you'd be standing like in the middle of the dome. It was so pretty. All the natural light would be flooded in. Your guests would be against, I guess, like the main hallway so that they would be watching you at the dome. And yeah, it was overall just so pretty. I thought it was such a unique space. There was so much history. It was very DC old-timey too. I think all of these places were, honestly. And so yeah, I thought it was really cool and definitely very unique. It kind of gave a little bit of an older vibe to the Fairmont, just like a little bit darker, a little bit more moody, but very similar in general. logistically to the Fairmont. Those are all the tours that I went on. Other hotels that I inquired about, but I just chose not to tour, I'm just gonna list them. Hay Adams, Willard Intercontinental, Meridian House, Anderson House, La Vie Restaurant, and District Winery. All of those I inquired, but I just chose not to tour because truthfully, all of those were outside of my budget. They were like extremely expensive. I would say all of those had food and beverage minimums of $50,000, and that's before venue cost, rentals, all of the fun things. So they were all so stunning and beautiful, but they were just outside of my budget. Those are all the tours. Now I'm gonna talk about pros and cons and just overall like pricing. The thing is, I know it'd be really simple to tell you guys like, here's how much each place costed, but what I came to realize and discover during this whole entire wedding venue process was that all the DC hotels offer something a little bit different from one another, so you can't really compare their packages unless you literally calculate everything that you would want for every single venue to see like what your estimated final total would be to try to compare apples to apples, because otherwise you just can't choose. Like otherwise they're just too different. For example, some venues had a ceremony / venue fee of $2,000, others had $10,000, but the one that had $10,000, which was I think the St. Regis, you had to actually pay extra for beef, which I didn't love. Whereas other places like the Mayflower, Hotel Washington, and I think even the Kimpton, you didn't have to pay extra for beef. So when it came to compare prices, I basically decided I wanted steak for all of my guests and I wanted top shelf alcohol for all of my guests. And actually all of the venues except for the Kimpton Monaco had their cake included. So that was another probably in between $50 to $1,000 depending on how nice you wanted your cake or your desserts, was already included. That was really nice. What I ended up doing was just calculating each package for apples to apples beef, same alcohol, because you actually had to pay extra for some of them to have like top shelf alcohol too, to try to get your overall estimated total cost per person, and then compare that per person price with the number of guests that you're hoping for to see if it reaches the food and beverage minimum. Because some places like the Hotel Washington had a food and beverage minimum of $30,000. All of these places, I estimated what my number of guests would be, multiplied it by the food and beverage minimum, and then just made sure that it reached the overall minimum, because I think for these DC hotels, the food and beverage minimum basically tells you like how many guests you probably should have at like a baseline level just to make sure that you hit that. Or if you wanted less guests, like what did you have to add on so that you would hit the food and beverage minimum? These are all things I had no idea. You guys, I had no clue. And then also for wedding / ceremony totals, I'll give you guys a breakdown right now, but I do think that this would be different based on the day of the week and the month and the year. So that's why like I'll tell you these, but I just don't think it really makes that big of a difference because it's just going to change depending on what your wedding is. So you have your food and beverage minimum, cake is included, chairs, tables, linens, chinaware, silverware, all that's included, and then ceremony / venue fee. So they all ranged, but the thing is, they kind of all totaled out to the same amount at the very end, because some things just had extras where other places didn't. So with the exception of actually the St. Regis, this ended up actually not being what we went with, because even though it was so beautiful and I loved it so much, it was just a little bit too small for the number of guests that I wanted to have. And it was gonna be like probably $80,000 of just food, beverage, venue. So it just ended up being outside of our price range. And honestly, between the Hotel Washington, the Mayflower, Fairmont, and Kimpton, I think I honestly loved all of these almost equally. But even though the Fairmont was what people on Instagram who followed me liked the most, that was the one that actually felt the least like who I was. And I never understood what people said when they gave me the advice of when you go to your venue, like just try to envision yourself there. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. For some reason, it just did once I started doing it. So definitely go to tours in person if you can. The Fairmont, I loved it so much. It was so light and airy, but it almost just didn't feel like it fit with who I was. And I really can't explain it other than that. It just didn't felt like it was me. And I personally did not like the aspect of having the ceremony and the reception in one room, because I personally just could not take the idea of having like a screen in my photos and stuff. Again, I think everyone's like really picky about random things, but that was just something for me that I didn't love. So the Fairmont and the Kimpton ended up being removed too. But what I did like about the Kimpton was that your bartender was included, which I liked. I think you might have had to pay for one extra, but all the other places you had to pay for 2 people for your bartender, which is usually 1 bartender per 75 guests. Again, this is like where all of the pricing just ended up being too different that I just had to like max total it all out to see what it was. And then for the Fairmont, even though it had a lower ceremony / venue fee of $4,500 compared to other ones, you had to pay for the overall like shipping / delivery of your chairs and stuff. So stuff stuff like that. That was the only venue that had that type of add-on. Again, this just kind of goes to show that they're all very different. So that brings us to the Hotel Washington and the Mayflower, and I ended up going with Hotel Washington. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to actually say it. Hold on, I'm gonna move you guys over because the shadow's getting in the way. The Hotel Washington, in my opinion, was actually the video venue tour that I think looked the worst compared to all of them. But in person, that is what I wanted. Like in person, it just felt like me. I could envision myself there. I brought my mom there and she loved it. She said she could see me there. It was really between the Hotel Washington and the Mayflower for me. Thomas had a preference on Hotel Washington, so that definitely helped, but he was like, I'll leave it up to you to decide. And ultimately, I loved the Mayflower so much. I actually think I like aesthetically loved it a little bit more, but it was all inside. There was like very little to no natural light included with like your overall wedding experience, that I just felt like if I was gonna have a spring wedding, which is such a premium time of the year for obvious reasons with the weather, I just wanted to make use of the weather more. So if anyone is getting married in Washington, DC, and you're getting married in like the winter or even like fall time, end of fall time, which is not peak season, which is good for your prices, look at the Mayflower because it is so beautiful. So yeah, that kind of pushed me towards Hotel Washington, and I'm really happy with my decision because the Hotel Washington, in my opinion, was the most like reasonable, all-inclusive place. I loved that all of my guests could stay there. I loved that there was a rooftop where I could even have an after party there. Your cake was included, your dance floor was included. At all of these venues, by the way, your dance floor is included, which I loved. And yeah, I just felt like it kind of made the most sense. For some reason, again, it was like the vibe of that venue just felt the most right, and it felt the most like comfortable to me. So that's it. I don't know if any of you guys are surprised, and I don't know if any of you guys agree, but the thing is, this is my wedding and I'm just sharing my experience and my decisions and my reflections with you guys. If you don't like it, it's not your wedding, you know? And I think that's what you have to kind of tell yourself when you do share. If you are planning a wedding, just tell yourself it's your wedding, you know? If someone else doesn't like it, well, it's not their wedding, so that's fine. What I know is that I am already making a Pinterest board of my venue, and the more that I look at it, the more I love it, and the more I just think it's like the most reasonable too. Like, did I want something that was over the top luxurious outside of my budget that would check off all of my boxes? Yes, but I also think that it's okay to be reasonable, and like it's still gonna be pretty expensive because it's a freaking wedding, you know? I just felt like with how expensive all of it was, the Hotel Washington just honestly made the most sense to me. And for that reason, I'm very happy with my decision. But I do want to say the Hotel Washington is a more like standard kind of ballroom situation. So it is going to make me think outside the box a little bit more about how I want to make the venue, like the venue's character kind of come out more, because the lobby is the character, but the ballrooms don't necessarily feel exactly like the lobby. So I think I just have to like think creatively about how I want to go about that. And I think that's okay. Again, like I said in the beginning of the video, I wanted a venue that would speak for itself and stuff. And I think the Hotel Washington does. It's a very classic Washington, DC location, but I just want to voice that it's okay to make compromises for your wedding if it means that you're a little bit more reasonable with your budget and you're a little bit more reasonable and just flexible in general. Like if I just had a checklist of things that I must have no matter what, and every single thing had to be checked, I don't know if I would find a wedding venue, you know? That is everything for my wedding venue, and that is everything for this very first video of the wedding planning series. I have no idea how long this video is, but I've actually been filming this video for 45 minutes at this point. So if you made it to the very end, let me know what you thought of this first video of the wedding planning series. Like I said, I'm gonna talk every couple months about the things that I've done for the wedding. My goal is to get as many of the vendors done as possible. I just know that the big one, like the big one, is the venue and guest list and all the things. So that's what I tackled first. And I feel like everything else can be decided now that I do have the venue. Whereas I felt like why would I choose my photo booth first if I didn't even know where the photo booth would be, for example. So yeah, if you guys wanna follow along more day-to-day life, and I talk about the wedding all the time in my vlogs, but this is just a dedicated sit-down video. Let me know what you guys thought, and other than that, I will see you guys in a new video very soon. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. I post new videos twice a week in 2025. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in my next video, but until then, miss you already.